Okay, so I'm Kat from Giving Voice. I'm here with Karen Stobbe from In the Moment. She's our guest. She is a dementia warrior who has made it her life's work to improve the quality of life for all dementia warriors. As a caregiver, Karen discovered that her theater background could help create better understanding and connections. Among her numerous credits, she's got over 700 workshops, keynotes, and performances. That is an amazing number, Karen. She's got books and training videos. You can check out her website. Again, it's In the Moment. She's been featured on NPR's This American Life, and she has been a speaker at the International TED Med Conference. If you're new to Giving Voice, and some of you are new to us, we have been leading the way in creating performing arts choruses designed for the full participation of people with dementia, with the support of a friend or family member and volunteers. We help individuals and organizations start their own life-changing choruses for people living with dementia through our free toolkit, educational opportunities, and free consultations. We believe in the power of music to improve the lives of people with dementia and their families. A little background about why we thought there would be such a great opportunity for us to chat with Karen is that with our very first chorus back in 2014 in Minneapolis, we had this great artistic director, Jeannie Brinley Barnett, and she came up with this sort of slogan for the chorus: there is no wrong in this room. I don't know if any of you have ever been in a chorus, but it's a lot of like sit up straight. And, if you, maybe it's just me because I was not the best singer in the chorus, but, you might be a little flat or you're coming in too early. There's none of that at a Giving Voice chorus. We just get better by singing, by encouragement. There is no wrong in this room. And it occurred to us that that's just like improv. In improv, you can't do it wrong, which is there's not too many things that you can't do wrong. So Karen, do you want to tell us a little bit about how you got started with improv, and how you feel that that's a great way to connect with people who are living with dementia?
Sure. Well, good morning to everybody, or good afternoon, wherever you are. I'm so pleased to be here with you guys today. And this is my favorite topic ever. If you are ever at a event, a cocktail party, some kind of social event with me, you'll find me off by myself in the corner, kind of observing everybody until someone wants to talk about Alzheimer's or improv or both. And then I come alive, and that's when I want to talk. So back in the way back, I've realized that I really had a hard time memorizing, and I wanted to do some kind of theater. I wanted to do some kind of acting, but I really just had a hard time. No matter how I tried it, I can do it, but boy, does it take me a lot of time. And I discovered improv when I was about 16, 17. And I went from one group to another group to being with a large organization for many years. And my dad was diagnosed in 1994 with Alzheimer's. And at that time, there wasn't that much that was really said about Alzheimer's. There was a lot about the brain. We wanted to talk about the brain a lot. But the more that I thought about it, the more that I realized that there was this huge connection between kind of the guidelines of how to be with someone living with dementia and the guidelines for performing improv. Now, if you just listen to these, just kind of maybe even close your eyes and listen to these guidelines. And for those of you who are know, work with people living with dementia, just listen to these guidelines. Listen fully. Say yes and. Agree. Don't deny. Commit 100%. Accept offers and gifts. Go with the flow. Step into their world. Be in the moment. silence can be powerful and enjoy or get joy from. So what I found interesting was when I wrote these down and showed them to, I was working part-time at a CCRC in, especially in the adult day center. And I showed this to the executive director there, who was really, Beth was really a Alzheimer's kind of expert in a way. And I say in a way, because I don't think anybody can be an expert in dementia unless you have dementia.
Right.
But I showed this list to her and she was like, "Oh, is this something about a dementia workshop you're doing?" And I was like, "Well, actually, I was writing down the guidelines for improv." And I showed my husband, and who I met doing improv, and he thought this was something to do that I was doing a workshop on improv. So they both saw the parallels in the world of Alzheimer's and improv. And they are just how I have realized to use them is yes, you can do improv with people living with dementia, but if you learn these as a person who is a caregiver, a care partner, a someone who works alongside or sings alongside, if you learn these and you take them to heart, then they become just something you do. Just like in caregiving, you learn how to be and it just becomes something you do and you don't have to think about it. So I don't say that these are improv rules, more of guidelines,
So
but
it's so interesting, Karen, because when I think about improv, I think, oh, you have to really think on your feet. But
you
the
do.
way you're putting it, it doesn't feel so intimidating.
Right. So you do have to think on your feet, but the reason why it's good to take classes or to even get together and rehearse with your group that you perform with is the better you are at these guidelines, the better you'll perform on stage.
Mm,
So it's like if you learn to listen fully to the other people on stage and not try and have a preconceived thought in your head of, oh, this is what I'm going to do when I get on stage, then you are a better listener. And it's the same thing. If you think you're on stage and you think in your head, boy, I'm setting up this scene to be in a kitchen. Look at me miming this fridge. Look at me taking a drink of milk. Look at all this I'm doing. But then the person walks in and says something like, you're in a mad scientist lab. Well, you've got to go with the flow. You didn't
right.
say anything. You were just thought in your mind you were setting this up. And it's kind of the same thing. All of these guidelines really set you up to be with people in a better way. Um, One of the big ones, everybody always asks, what's the biggest one? And I can't pick which baby, right? But I think it's between the go with the flow and the listen fully. Because the go with the flow, and you guys have probably all had this kind of moment, but that someone might say something that you think, oh my goodness, there's no way that Bob has ever hang glided. I know his life, I know his story, but then just go with the flow of what he's saying. If he's telling a story about hang gliding, what does it hurt, right? What does it
Mm,
hurt if he's talking about that? So I'll give you a music, for instance. Um, my daughter was about 10, 11, around that age where they really think they know everything and they're trying to tell you how much they know now. And she was sitting at the dining room table doing her homework, but she had her little iPod playing some music. And my mom was sitting there at the table. My mom lived with us after my dad passed away. My mom lived with us for 12 years. She had Alzheimer's. She was diagnosed a year after my dad. And my dad passed in 2000. And my mom and Grace are sitting at the table. My mom was doing her word searches, and the Beatles is playing. I want to hold your hand, and I could hear. I'm sitting in the living room folding laundry, and I could hear my mom kind of, I want to hold your hand. and she's kind of singing along, and the song stops, and my mom looks at Grace and says, "Who was that?" And Grace says, "That's the Beatles." And she goes, "Oh, but what are their names?" And Grace said their names. And she said, "Oh, I dated them." My mom at the time was like 85. And Grace, you could see it in her face. You know, she wanted to go, mm, ah, "There's no way you dated them, Grandma," you know. But she didn't. She stopped. Her eyes got really big. And she said, "Really? Tell me about it." And I was like, yes. Because then they had this great conversation about how my mom dated the Beatles and she liked Ringo the best, and how the people would chase her, but she didn't care. And a lot of people, when I tell that story, they say, "Well, where'd that come from? You know, she didn't know anything really about the Beatles." Well, except that my oldest sisters are all 18, 16, and 14 years older than me, and they were in the Beatle craze, right? So
Sure.
my mom heard the Beatles and the word Beatles all the time. So that's part of her history too. So not only is that song in her head, it's also very repetitive. So when you think about some songs, we never tried to really focus on just big band, which is what she kind of grew up listening to, or the really old like Benny Goodman and singing and Duke Ellington and that kind of stuff. She liked any music that she liked. You know what I'm saying? Like she never liked country music. So it wasn't like we would play a country song and she would all of a sudden love it. It just wasn't in her life. It wasn't in her life story. But there was some songs that either they were really repetitive, you know, think about Respect, think about Pharrell Williams' Happy Song,
Yeah.
think about, uh, what's another one? Oh, there's just tons that they just repeat themselves and repeat. And so she could pick up the words and start
Right. You get
singing
that
with it,
chorus going.
right? And
Yeah.
so that's one thing about songs and music, that it doesn't have to be from her generation. It just has to be her style of music.
Right, that's
So,
true. We tend to think like, oh, you're this age group, you like this music, but that's not necessarily true.
right? I mean, you don't just like the music that you grew up in. We all have very eclectic tastes, and
Hmm.
we all grew up with listening sometimes to our parents' music or older siblings' music. I didn't really like rock. You know, I growing up, but my brother was Mr. Led Zeppelin, you know, listening to that kind of music. So I started to like it a little bit because he liked it, you know, and I worshiped him. So that can play into it too. It also, there is this amount of just being able to listen to something that someone else enjoys, and you see that they enjoy it, so you enjoy it too. There is that kind
Right.
of almost a peer pressure, even if it's just one person. So
Like
that's
that
one thing.
joy
So
contagion, right? Like when
yeah,
somebody
so
else is happy, it's kind of hard not to be happy too.
exactly. So that goes back to that go with the flow. That's exactly what Grace did. She went with the flow. Instead of interrupting Grandma and saying, "Grandma, there's no way you know the Beatles," she just went with the flow. And it's the same thing. If somebody says, "Well, I once did this," or "I went," and you're like, just go with the flow. What does it hurt?
Right.
And that's one of the things I talk about too, is that when you think about something that a person with dementia may be doing, a lot of times we see it as not normal. And so we want them to stop it. But when you think about it, it's probably very normal for the situation. And you have to look at it from this place of normalcy. Start from a place of normalcy and then jump off and go from there. And what I mean by that is, and then I'll get back on track to my improv. What I mean by that is, let's say you're sitting there and you're waiting for an interview, and you're at this little coffee table waiting for this interview, and there's a napkin thing there, and you pick out a napkin and you start shredding it in little pieces because you're so nervous. And then you pick out another one and you're shredding and you're shredding. And then the person with the clipboard walks out. You kind of gather all your shreddings and kind of hide them with your hand. It's very normal. We know why you're doing it. The interviewer can see why you're doing it. But if a person living with dementia sits there and shreds up napkins, and we see it as abnormal, we have a tendency to see things that are very everyday normal. But once a person gets a diagnosis, it seems like it turns into something abnormal. So that's why I say start from a place of normal. See this person as someone that's just like me. They're just struggling in some areas of their life that maybe I'm not struggling. And maybe I'm struggling in some areas of my life that they're not. And that can help your mindset. So,
It's true.
again,
We tend to read things into what somebody with dementia is doing just because they have dementia when there might be a perfectly valid explanation for what's going on.
exactly, exactly. And I think that's a really important thing when we talk about, I say actions and reactions, but a lot of people say behaviors or behavioral expressions. I just say actions and reactions because I try and use normal language. So that's what we have. We have actions and then we react. And I think that's definitely the same thing. So um, I'll tell y'all a quick story in the sense of there was a lady that started at a nursing home, and she is very sweet. She was very kind to everybody. She was the kind of lady that reminded you of like the school librarian with the sweet dress and the little string of pearls. And she ate her breakfast with everybody and would chat a little bit. And she would have lunch no problem. But when it came to dinner time, she sat there and she wouldn't eat. And they couldn't figure out what was going on. And another night came by and they called her daughter and asked her if she would come by. And so the daughter brought her some food from her favorite little fast food place, and she ate it just fine. And she couldn't really express why she wasn't eating. So one night, my uh, friend, who was the administrator there, said, well, I got to kind of stand in her shoes. I got to sit where she sits. So she stayed for dinner and she sat next to her. And she watched as Judy, the lady, looked around and was just staring down the nurse that was over there with some applesauce cups. And she was taking pills out of a bottle and crushing them and putting it in applesauce. And so my friend leaned over to her and said, Judy, is it because of the medicine? And she said, oh, I'm not going to get poisoned. So in her mind, okay, this is pretty normal when you think about it. When no one's explaining this to you, she's thinking they're poisoning people in the evening, so I'm not eating dinner because she's seeing them hand out. And so she was trying to fill in these blanks of why is this person doing this? And when my friend explained it to her that this is why they can't swallow their medicine very well, so they're helping them crush. And she said, you don't even have any nighttime pills that you have to take. And plus, we won't ever crush them like that for you. She started to eat. And she
Mm.
was filling in the blanks of, oh, that's what she's doing. It's pretty normal when you don't understand what's going on, right? You you look at the situation, you try and figure it out. So that's what happens sometimes. So I'm going to go back to my list again because another big one, and I'm going to look in the chat and make sure if anybody's saying
Yeah, it's
anything.
just gonna encourage people to put any questions that you might have for Karen in the chat. We have a nice group of people here today, so we'd love to keep an eye on any questions that you might have.
And I love that there is no wrong in this room. Oh my Lord, do I love that. I love that because there really should never be a wrong in the room when we're thinking about persons with dementia. And one of the main reasons is a lot of times we focus on the end result and how amazing that is. But to a lot of people living with dementia, it's really about every moment. It's about the moments leading up to the finished product are
Mm.
just as important. as that final product, because every moment is that. It's the moment. And making those rehearsals, making those meetings enjoyable and fun and focused in a way that they can enjoy and participate is so huge that there was a couple of different programs that really focused on the end result of art. And everybody was like, oh, how did somebody with dementia make that? And I'm like, they're better than me. I can't do that. But it's not about that finished painting. And we shouldn't focus on that because it's about the process, the enjoyment of doing it. And that's the same I always thought with singing too. Um, so the yes and, if you think about this to where as you grow older, and maybe it's just happening to me, but I get a lot more no's in my life. And not just verbal no's, but I mean like no's like I can't run as fast as I used to. I um I can't even write as well as I used to. I got carpal tunnel in my hand. You know, things happen and it slows you down. I've lost some friends over the years through either they've passed away or we've grown apart. So you get these no's, and the older you get, the more no's kind of come along. And we even start getting more verbal no's as we age. Just like, no, mom, don't sit there. No, mom, it's not time to go yet. No, Nancy, we're still waiting. No, no. I mean, we get a lot of no's.
Mm.
And for me, it kind of pushes me down. And I get a little upset. Like if somebody told me that I could not leave a certain room, no, you've got to stay here, I would find a way to get out, right? I'd look around for a door. And so when you think about this, yes, and that instead of saying no to somebody, that we say yes, and. And so in improv, yes and basically means I agree with you and I'm going to build upon that idea, right? And then you've got your ellipse to continue on. And so if someone said, Karen, what a nice duck you have on your head on stage in improv, and I said, no, no, I don't have a duck. Well, what happens is that scene, that moment just stops. It can't go anywhere because that person was denied their idea. They were said no to by me, and it doesn't continue. Then they're like, okay, I guess I made it up. You know, what do they say to that? But instead, if a person says, Karen, what a nice duck you have on your head, and I say, yes, and you should see the dance it makes you do when you wear it, right? So not only did I say yes to the person that I had a duck on my head, I know, silly example, but I ended him by giving him something to do with it. So now
Right.
he's got to do a little dance and it moves the scene forward. So when you think about applying that idea to persons living with dementia, we'll use the classic example of I want to go home. And a lot of people may say that for a lot of different reasons. But when you say, oh no, you live here now, or oh no, you're going to get picked up in a little bit, don't worry. It's just these no's, no, you're not listening to what they're saying. And so if using instead the yes and, it can really help that situation. But it also gives them this gift of yes. So if they say, I want to go home, and you say yes, and tell me about your home, you're offering back something for them to give back to you. So you're not just saying, no, you can't go home right now. You're saying yes and. My dad, at the end, he was in a nursing home, and there was one day when he really latched on to me and was like, I'm going with you. I'm going home. I'm going home. And when I asked him to tell me about the home, my dad was born in Germany. He described the house in Germany. That's where he wanted to go home, not the house that he just left living with my mom. So he went to the house way back in his memory, long term memory, and that's the home he was talking about.
Mm.
So, but that same time when he said it to me, and I said, well, Dad, let's let's go outside then. Let's get your jacket. He looked around the room, and there was this sweet lady who was sitting there with a pink sweater around the back of her chair. And he just grabbed that pink sweater in his 6'2" frame and forced himself into the pink sweater and just said, let's go. So I thought it would take a little minute or two to go get his jacket. We would see they were making dinner. I would find a little way to redirect a teeny bit. But instead, he got the sweater on. So I said, okay. We walked around the nursing home block and we came to the front and he saw it and he goes, oh, that's where I go. So the idea of going home went away for him, and he was able to get outside, get some fresh air, and he recognized that's where he lived. That's where he needed to go. But let me just say one quick thing is I think that there's 4 different reasons if you get somebody that says, I want to go home. It could be because they really do, in their memory, remember the place they just left, and they want to go back to that place. More likely, they're talking about this home from 30, 40, 50. For my mom, it was almost 80 years ago that she talked about. And she never said the words, I want to go home. What she would say is, we pull up to the house and she goes, oh, are we home? And I'd say, yes, to our home, to our home we share with you. But I knew the home she meant was that log cabin from so many years ago in the mountains of West Virginia. Now, the third reason might be that person, when they say, I want to go home, you might hear that at someone who's at the end of their life. And they might even say, I'm ready to go home. And that means they're talking about home. But then the fourth thing is, when you personally think of the word home, these words pop into your head, right? My home makes me feel safe. I feel comfortable in my own home. I've got my own stuff. I got my pets, my garden, my food that I like, my pillow I like. So some people, when they say that, I believe they're looking for something. They're looking to fill a need, that they want to go home because that's where their dog is. That's where they feel the most comfort. This room doesn't look like their room. This bathroom doesn't look like their bathroom. So that's why home is so, so, so important, that it's one of those words that has so many different meanings. And if I asked every one of you to give me a different word, you could do it. So I challenge you too, that yes and can really ease someone when they're upset. Hearing that yes and I understand. Yes and I see what you're feeling. Yes and I feel that same way too. So that yes and can be really powerful and really help people to calm down a little bit. Another one is the step into their world. That's pretty much the same kind of as go with the flow. But when you step into the world in improv on stage, someone might have created a world on stage, and it would be like the opposite. If you know that it is, they just created a movie theater and you see it as clear as day, but somebody else in the improv group walks in and creates a grocery store in the middle of their, that's not stepping into that world. You've just completely collapsed it. And what happens a lot is, for families, if anybody's a family member here, that's one of the hardest things for us, because we want the person to be our person. We want them to be the same as they always were. And so we're constantly trying to kind of pull them back into our world. Instead, we could just take that step, take a few steps, and join them in theirs. Um, Here's another music story. So my dad, when they moved from Germany, they moved to Chicago. And my dad had to get a job. He was about 14. He started working as a busboy. And then when he was 15, he got a job at a dance hall, cleaning up glasses and being a busboy and everything. Well, when he got off work, he would change clothes and dance. He loved dancing. My mom and dad met dancing at a USO dance in Tampa, Florida. She was down there to study to be a candy striper, and he was stationed down there for training. And they danced um, one dance, and the chaperones, when you walked in, to all the ladies said you can only dance with a soldier once, and then you go dance with a different soldier because they didn't want anybody falling in love or hinky pinky, right? Well, my dad and my mom danced one dance. Then he said, go to the other end of the ballroom. And she said, what? And he said, just do it. So he walked down there and acted like it was the first time he asked her to dance. So they got two dances in, and then they got six more before the chaperones noticed. So when they broke them apart, they went outside and sat and talked all night. So my dad had a true love of dancing. And when he was very close in his later stages, very towards the end in his Alzheimer's, and we also thought he was having some strokes too and had some other issues. But there was a day when I walked into the nursing home and he pulls me over to his lazy boy. He was sitting in a lazy boy. And he says, hey, is there any way you could keep that old church lady from hanging all over me? And I was like, church lady? And he goes, yeah, she's kind of ruining my chances to dance with any of these younger girls. And I'm like, sure. Oh, mom. He thought my mom was this old church lady that was coming in to visit the soldiers. And I said, well, what are you doing here with all these folks? And he said, well, they didn't have room in the military area. So I said I would be with the older people. So he's talking about hitting on the CNAs and the nurses, is what he was talking about. So he saw my mom not as his wife anymore, which when she finally got over that first part, she was like, oh, she could take a break from visiting him every single day, she thought. And I said, you need that. That's fine. My brother, who looked almost exactly like a younger version of my dad thought he was another soldier coming in to visit. When I came in, he said, hold on. And he got his walker and he walked over to the record player and he put on Benny Goodman record. And it was the Benny Goodman, I remember it distinctly. He was sitting there on the cover with his, what's that called? You direct, the conductor, Dealey Bob. And he's sitting there like this with his glasses on. And my dad took it out, put it on, and he turned around without the walker and said, let's dance. And I had never danced with my dad. I had never even thought it would be a possibility, but it was the most bizarre thing that this man with a walker, once the music hit, his feet moved, not shuffled, and we danced. And so once you start dancing, everybody else in the entire nursing home great room is what they called it, wanted to get up and dance. It's a catching, it's contagious. Music is powerful in that way. And so they had to put on. So I moved down there. I lived 6 hours north of them at that time. So I decided to move down for a couple of months in the summer. Plus, they lived on a lake. So I moved down there. And so we had to put in at 2 o'clock every day was dance with Karen time. Because if I walked in, my dad would just go over to the record player and want to dance. And so they were like, don't do it at any other time because you're interrupting meals, you're interrupting, because everybody then wanted to dance. But the funniest moment we had was, I mean, it was just so lovely. And when it was done, he was done dancing, he was done. And he'd go sit down. He didn't even say goodbye to me or anything about me being his daughter. He just thought I was somebody there to dance with him. I imagine I was a USO dancer. That was all in my head, of course. But one of the funniest moments that happened was the lady that was across the hall from my dad. Her name was Ethel, and she loved to dance every time. And she would just get up and dance and hold on to the back of his shoulders if we were dancing, if there was no one for her. So one of these days, I got there a little too early and I walked in. My dad puts the music on, and I can see down the hall. She's coming out of her room, Ethel is, and she is stark naked, full of bubbles and soap. She was in the bathtub taking a bath and got away from her CNA, and it's like coming down the hall, coming, I'm gonna come, I'm dancing. She wanted to dance that bad. She heard the music and was like, it's time. And so
People need their music.
man, I was like, you guys need to play some music in the bathroom. And she's taking a bath. That's how much she loves music. But it was that's the whole reason I moved down there, was because he was playing this music and we were able to dance. And then I started to do it at night too. And it was so powerful to me that I moved away for a little bit from my husband to just be down there for a little bit. He'd join us here and there, but when that opportunity arises, when you see that window open, you have to jump on it and step into their world and go with it. And it was just one of my best memories ever. That that no one can take it. Somebody asked, "Well, do you have a video of it?" And I'm like, I didn't think of that back then. We weren't such an obsessed. Got to videotape everything. I didn't even. I just enjoyed the moment, and I didn't even think of taking a picture, or nobody else thought that. It's kind of funny how that was only what 20 something years ago, 25, oh, 25 years ago. And we just didn't do that back then. How we've changed a little bit. So those are kind of some of my thoughts. But I also think that, and we all know, I mean, music. My mom grew up in this cabin in the mountains of West Virginia, to where all their songbooks, all their poetry books, all their school books, they only had one or two, and they had to learn, share them, and learn them, and then you didn't have it anymore. It passed on to another kid. So all those songs from back then, all that poetry, that's all ingrained in her head, that she had it there. And so the other thing is, we have to be careful, because some music is so powerful that it can be like turning a switch on emotions.
Mm,
And and that's good. It's not bad. It's good. But we have to be careful that never know what song may trigger some sad emotions or traumatic emotions for someone. And that happens to us when you think about it. Sometimes I might hear what was one of my mom's favorite songs, and it's like whoosh, it hits you. But we recognize it. We know why we're feeling that. But a person living with dementia may not have the capacity to understand why they're feeling what they feel. And so we need to be aware of that too when you're thinking about music. And it might be a happy song. It could be "You're My Sunshine," that is, was their grandmother's song that they sang to them. So we have to be prepared for that too, to think about. And people think, oh my goodness, well, we don't want anybody to cry or feel bad. Well, it's normal. It's being part of being a human, is to feel all the emotions. So yeah, I'm gonna just check out these comments here real quick.
yeah, I was gonna say there are a couple of comments that I think are really great.
Yeah,
This is why my mother's behavior changed dramatically when she was locked in. So I think you feel like you're not being listened to anymore.
yeah.
So difficult to get staff to buy into this. Some do well with it, but some are so concrete with thinking. They don't receive this communication training I always try to model when possible. But frustrating that creativity isn't discussed in facilities.
That's a really, really, really big one for, we're in a healthcare, we're in a medical field, right? And I remember the first time I worked, I have actor training, improv training. Um, I did not have, I am trained medically only in that I could save you if you're drowning. I can give you CPR. That's about it. I have no other, and I went through CNA training at the CCR that I was working at, which helped me greatly with the care of both of my parents. But that was one thing that I didn't comprehend when I first started working in the first CCR, that I would say something and they were like, "Oh, Karen, you're so funny to think that, because you don't know, you have no medical training," kind of thing. And I'm like, "Well, but why not?" It was so set in stone. And it was, this is how it is. And I'm like, yeah, but of all the people in the world that we need to be creative with, it's people living with dementia. We have this disease that affects every single person differently, right? No, not only do we have different types of dementia, but even let's just say a room full of people with Alzheimer's, they all have different backgrounds. They all have different life stories. They all have different areas of the brain. Alzheimer's doesn't just go, starts here, then it goes exactly here and here and here and here and around in a circle. No, it is affecting your neurons in your brain, and it's going to affect different areas. So nobody's the same. You can look at a forum or a message board and go, oh, that's kind of similar to what my mom does. Oh, that's kind of, but nobody's the same. So of all the types of, we should be creative, and we should be taught to be creative, because every interaction is different. You can kind of know. Miss Minerva was one of the ladies that used to be a school music teacher, and her language got down to be just kind of la-las. So she was trying to communicate something to you. She would go la la la, la 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 la, and she would use her face and her hands to communicate. And I'd say, oh yeah, I understand that you're pointing that out to me. You're saying, so I would just try and figure out what she was trying to say. But that's how she still communicated, was her singing in la-las. And some people didn't like it. Some people said she's just not communicating anything. But I believe that if we really listen, people are communicating with us. And even if they're not verbal anymore, even the people that when you walk into a nursing home and you hear someone yelling help, and I've had this happen about 3 or 4 times, and whoever's giving me the tour will say, and I'm not kidding, every time, that's just what she does. She does it every day, all day. That's all. It's just the Alzheimer's. And every time I'll go over to them and hold their hand, and I can see in their eyes there's more there than just the Alzheimer's or the dementia, that they're trying to say something. And I believe that if we really listen, we can hear it. Um, so yes, I find music very powerful. Our home here, where my mom lived with us, was constant. From the moment we woke up, there was music playing, and Christmas especially. That was the big time. From Thanksgiving through New Year's, it was constant. I mean, I'm not kidding. Every room, constant. I think my daughter is the only 25-year-old that knows every single Christmas song that's ever been sung. She knows them by heart. And in fact, when my mom was dying, she was very nonverbal at the very end. And there was a moment where it was just Grace and I in the room. And Grace went up to her eye to eye. And my mom sat up and started singing Winter Wonderland out of the blue. And Grace and her sang like 4 different Christmas songs. I had to leave the room. I wanted to give them their place, their space. And she sang 4 different, right face to face with Grace, and then lay back down and didn't say another word after that. It just is amazing that her last words were singing. And I believe the last one that she was singing was Frosty the Snowman, which it just cracks me up entirely. That's the last words my mom said. But she said that she loved Grace in between the songs and would hold her face and pat her face. And so it was very powerful connection between the two of them. They were not like granddaughter and grandma. They were like um, old little sisters, old sisters. I hate to use this term, but like old maid, like quibbling sisters that lived together. But they had this beautiful relationship. So I want to share with you too that I think sometimes we forget that people living with dementia are able to grow, that they're able to learn, they're able to like new things, that even if someone um, thinks, there's two quick examples. One, my friend who's a drummer, and like a drummer, like drums, not drum set. Um, I asked him if he wanted to try and do some workshops in the adult day center. It was all with people living with dementia. And so he did. And we had this one lady who, when her daughter found out that we were going to do that, she got there the day of the workshop and pulled me to the side and said, "This is not my mom's thing. She's not going to like this. In fact, I think she's going to get very upset. And I think you need to take her into the other room or do something else with her because she's not going to like this." And we said, "Oh, okay. All right." And we said, "Do you mind waiting, like, a little further back, basically, where she can't see you," is what I wanted. And we're sitting in this large circle, and Tom's bringing out all these instruments, and he wheels in, I'm not kidding, a gong, a friggin' giant gong, wheels it in. And at that moment, Ruth goes, "Mine." That's the woman that the daughter said, no, she won't want to be in here. She just pointed and went, "Mine." Gave her the big mallet, and when it was time, or whenever she felt, she banged that thing, and she laughed every single time. And the daughter sat in the back just basically going, had no clue, no clue. So I'm saying this because sometimes us family members don't either want to see our person do different things because that's not who they are, or just don't believe it. Don't believe that they can do something new. And they can. So sometimes don't listen to us. if 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 you've got a person that, you know one of the family members saying, "Oh, this is great, they're gonna love this," and the other person's like, "No, mom doesn't want to sing, she's never sang, she sings for..." No, ask the person what they want to do, and they'll tell you. They'll listen to you. It may take a time, it might take a rehearsal or two for them to break out of their shell. Deborah's shell, I see right there. But they might, and it might not be the right thing for them, but you have to try, and you can't stop trying, is what I want to say too. I'm gonna see what my time is here.
We've got
Oh my
about 10
goodness.
minutes left. If anybody
God, I
has any
talk a
more
lot.
comments. Oh, but it's so interesting. Karen, I was wondering earlier, you mentioned something about silence. Would
uh,
you touch on that a little bit?
so silence. So one of the rules of improv too, to me, not everybody, a lot of people hit the stage and they start talking right away. I don't believe that. I think that silence is very powerful, that if you hit the stage and start setting up where you are or who you are, everybody's rapt, like, "What's she doing? What, ooh, what's next?" But silence, we think sometimes we have to fill the silence when we're with a person with dementia. And I believe it's our own anxiety, it's our own nervousness that we've got to fill it because, I don't know, what do I say to somebody? You say what you normally would say to anybody. But those moments of silence, just sitting together, either, I mean, literally, this is what I say to everybody: listening to music, just holding their hand, scratching their back, putting some lotion on their dry skin, and just no talking. That that I have so many people that have early onset Alzheimer's. They're in their 40s, 50s, early 60s, and they say by the end of the day they're so exhausted because they're just trying to keep up with everybody. They're just trying to follow conversations. They're just trying to act normal. They're just trying to be okay with all the noise and so much going on that it's just exhausting. And sometimes people might mistake that for what some people call sundowning, or, you know, and that's a whole nother webinar. But we all kind of get that around 3 or 4 or 5 o'clock when we've had a rough day. For me, I got to get outside and take a walk. Some people need a cup of coffee. Some people want a piece of chocolate. Some people just get crabby. But we've got to recognize that it's so hard for people, and sometimes to not have to think about anything. to just be able to be quiet and pause. I don't, one of you lovely singer music people would probably know, but there's a great quote about, the most important part of music is sometimes the pauses. That if it's not music, if you don't have pauses between the notes and how important those are, the silence. And so, yeah, I find that very, very important, very important. So, do we want to see if there's any questions?
Does anybody have any questions?
You could, uh,
Comment. I find it so frustrating that I react in old patterns to behaviors. This is so helpful to give me new ideas to break out of my own responses. It
yeah,
has been so helpful, Karen.
yeah, and I'm not getting anything from this, but I have a whole website that I created for families. You don't even have to sign up on an email. It doesn't cost you anything. It's being in the moment. I'll actually put it in here. It's beinginthemoment.org. And um, underneath the very first top where it says know how, it there is a ton of videos that can help you. And they're filmed with actors. It's all free.
It's
And
linked
what
in
do I
all
mean
of
by
the emails I've sent out too. I encourage everyone to go check it out. There's so many great resources on there. We do have a question. What did you mean by accept offers and gifts?
so in improv on stage, you're given a lot of offers. And that's the part of like the yes and part. So if you're on stage and somebody says, great, let's go jump in my car. And instead of just going and jumping in the car, you say, oh, but first I've got to do this, this, and this. You're not accepting that was an offer that was just given to you. And on stage, a lot of time, I call it a gift. Someone gives you a gift of moving the scene along, doing something instead of just standing there as talking heads. And that we give gifts. You need to accept that someone offers to you and move along. I didn't make any of this fit. That's really the language that we use in improv. It's just kind of crazy. But in the world of dementia, sometimes you're given a lot of gifts. Um, you're given the gifts of stories. You're given the gifts of them offering. I had this one lady that swore up and down I was her daughter, and it was kind of this gift that I was given to be her daughter. And I'm not for lying. I just didn't say I wasn't. I just went along, I went with the flow and accepted this. Another thing can be that I accept this gift of this story. And maybe you're with someone who tells the same story over and over and over and over. Well, they're going to progress in their dementia, and there'll be a time when they don't tell that story anymore. And so treat that moment as a gift that you're able to hear this and maybe ask some questions, see if it changes. Talk to them, have a conversation about it. It must be important to them because they keep telling it over and over and over. And that
Yeah.
happened with us, the watermelon story. That all summer, my mom talked about watermelon. She'd see a watermelon, tell the same story. We'd talk about, she'd see one in the grocery store, same story. The next year, bought our first watermelon, no story. She had progressed to where that just wasn't there anymore. My daughter had it, we all had it memorized, but Grace said it back to her, and then she went, oh, that happened to me. So, it's lovely, but it is this gift that we're given, and we need to see that as a gift and not as a punishment or a behavior, you know?
Yeah, what an amazing reframing. Instead of thinking about it like somebody's wrong or they didn't get it right or they don't remember it correctly, to like think about it in the moment that it's something that they're sharing with you, that it's
Right,
something they're offering to you, that it's a gift. Such
right.
a huge change in perspective.
And before you think, oh, they're doing this again or they're doing that, well, who's it hurting?
Mm.
If this certain behavior or action that a person's doing, let's even just say pacing, if somebody is up and pacing, who's that hurting? Nobody. Is there a reason for health or safety? No, there's no rugs for them to trip on. It's making them happy. It's purposeful. If they're getting exercise, so leave them alone. It's like we see it as not normal, but I pace when I'm thinking. If I'm like in a meeting and we're all brainstorming, I get up and sometimes I pace. It helps me think. So I just wonder too, is that what that person's doing? Are they a walker and they're just wanting to walk? It's we need to reframe. It's just like sometimes our language too. We used to say diaper when and referring to depends. We've gotten away from that finally, but there's a lot of language that we can still change. That's so powerful. Like had somebody tell me that their loved one is attention seeking, and I'm like, well, so am I. I like attention. I mean, maybe they're looking for connection. Maybe they're
Yeah.
looking for love. Maybe they're looking for something besides, why are they? And I think on closing this, if anybody else has any questions, please put them in. But I do think that we need to see people as as us, and then we can help understand them a little bit better. And we never, when you look at different books and trainings and such, we say, oh, well, this is what's happening. This person thinks this because you look like their ex-wife or something. Well, we never try and figure out why. Well, that's not a good example. Let me use this. Someone is not going to the restroom in the toilet. Okay. So we say, oh, well, that's this. We never ask why. We all talk about how to stop them from doing it, but you need to figure out the why behind any of these types of actions or reactions, because then you can help them stop that if needed be. But then you figure out the why. If you don't figure out the why, it's just going to keep happening again and again and again, right? So always figure out the why behind whatever is happening. And I think that's really all the time we have time
Yeah,
for.
we're just about out of time. But before we close, I just wanted to say thank you to you, Karen, but also to all of the people who showed up here today. We have so many incredible people in our choral community singing, directing, just really changing what it means to live with dementia by getting out there in the community and being who they are. We have just so many wonderful people. So, and I am so appreciative and thankful of your time today, Karen. You are just amazing. And I think you've changed so many lives.
Uh, Thank you. And I just want to let y'all know too that this is my second book. That's my mom and daughter on the cover there.
What
I
a
think
great
they're being
photo.
very in the moment. That's the name of it. If you want a copy, um, it's 296 pages. But you can get it on my home website, in-themoment.net, that I just put into the chat. I'm pretty proud of it. I'm also proud that my daughter wrote her own chapter about growing up with a grandma with Alzheimer's. And that chapter is called Grace, because that's her name. But if you want to order that, it's on the inthemoment.net site. And I do appreciate the work y'all are doing, and I want to try and see if I can start one. There's nothing in this area, in the mountains here in North Carolina.
Well, you need a chorus for sure.
I do. I got to find somebody that can help me though, because I have no tune,
Yeah.
no tune in my head. I can't sing. So
Well, the
anyway, but
only
thank
way to
you
get
all.
better at singing is more singing. So thank you so much.
Thank you
Applause,
guys.
applause,
Appreciate it.
brava, brava. Thank you.
Cheers.